G'day everyone, this is Kate here from the Narrate team. This past weekend we were blessed to have Hannah Drga share with us. Hannah is the Hospitality and Scattering Director here at Narrate, and she shared with us some past experiences and lessons learned while on a short-term mission in Kenya. Enjoy.
Hey, good morning. It's so great to see you here today. If we haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Hannah, and I get to lead the hospitality team here at Narrate. So normally on a Sunday morning, this is not my gig. This isn't my main role. Normally I get to hang out in the back of the room, and I make sure everything in the back runs smoothly. And then you might see me hop up here and welcome people or give you some info on the latest scattering event. And then I get to go to the back of the room, and that's my comfort zone back there. But Adam knew he was going to be gone this morning, and so he asked if I would want to speak and share a little bit. And so I'm really excited this morning. I'm going to share with you some lessons that I learned from my time spent in Kenya. Lessons that I'm still learning and I'm still processing. And so I hope that you find it interesting and maybe are able to apply something to your life. If not, that's fine too. Just sit back and listen. So as you may know, as some of you may not know, I've actually had the opportunity to travel to Kenya twice, once in 2012, and then I went back in 2014. So the first time I went in 2012, I went for 2 months, and as you can see, if you're not familiar, Kenya is a country on the east side of Africa. So the first time I went, it was so impactful and so transformational in my life that I decided to go back in 2014 for 6 months. So this morning, I'm mostly going to talk about the first time I got to go. The first time I went to Kenya, I went with a group of 30 students through a group called InterVarsity. So we all met in New York. So all these students were from all over the United States. We met in New York and flew over to Kenya together. And we landed in Nairobi. This map's kind of washed out on the big screen, but Nairobi is the capital city of Kenya. It's a city of about 4 million people, and it's in the south central area of Kenya. And so we were there for 2 months. The first week and a half was really spent they focused on all these shared experiences that we got to have together as a group. So we got to visit a slum for the first time, and we got to visit some of the missions and projects and churches that were doing work trying to help the people in the slums. We got to go to downtown Nairobi, the central business district, which I should have put a picture of that up. That's insane downtown. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. We also got to have a village experience, and we really focused on language skills and learning some of the culture and meeting some of the local people. A quick funny story is as we were getting over jet lag and trying to meet people and figure out the language, our leaders broke us up into groups of about 4 or 5 people, and they gave us a list of items that we would need to purchase for our 2 months in Kenya. But this list was all in Swahili, the local language. So they gave us this list, told us about how much these items would cost, and sent us out. So I have this vivid memory of trying to buy, one of the items on the list was omo. So I'm talking to this woman at a vegetable stand, and in my horrible Swahili and her better than my Swahili English, we figured out I was trying to buy little packets of laundry detergent at the vegetable stand. And so we got to have all sorts of these weird cultural experiences as you're trying to navigate, a different culture. So that was the first week and a half. And then the second part of this 2-month trip, we got sent out on what's called ministry assignments. So you got paired up in partners. That's very biblical. You get sent out 2 by 2. That's so funny. I just realized that. So you get a student partner, and then you get sent out all across Kenya to these different regions. So can we throw the map of Kenya back up? So you might go to the northern desert regions of Lodwar. That's 2 or 3 days in a tiny little bus across Kenyan desert. Or maybe you could go to the coast and you get to hang out in a village and work along the shores. Or maybe you could get sent to western Kenya and you could go to a fishing village on the shores of Lake Victoria. Or maybe you would get sent to central Kenya and you got to work with the Maasai and the Samburu tribes. Or there were 3 assignments that stayed in Nairobi and did work in the slums. So the evening came where we got our partner and they gave us her ministry assignment. And I was so excited. I was ready for an adventure. I wanted to get outside of this horrible, loud city of 4 million people, and I wanted to go see a completely different part of Kenya. But God had some other plans for me, as it works out. And the next morning, I found myself on a bus to the Corogocho slum. And you can put that picture up. Thank you. That's like a street view of the place where I was getting sent. And so I met the host family. Their names were Alfred and Elika, and they were two of the sweetest people you would ever want to meet. Alfred there on the left, that's a great picture of him. That's like his personality. He's just like big and friendly and welcoming. So he is in charge of overseeing what is called the Tumaini Ministries, and it's a network of churches, clinics, and schools in the slums around Nairobi. And then his wife, Elika, she gets to teach refugee women different sewing and crafting skills so they can make these really cool like clothes and bags and sell to people so they have a skill and they can earn an income that way. So I was put at ease as I met the family, and I realized they didn't live right in the slums. They lived in this apartment complex compound about a 10-minute walk from the slums. So I very quickly realized, like, this is my home for 3 weeks. I need to just get over myself, know that I'm going to be here for 3 weeks, and I really want to make the most of this experience. So I thought, okay, I can do this. But as we know, God has some other plans and some more wrenches to throw into my plan. The third evening that we were on assignment, I woke up incredibly ill. I'll spare you like all of the horrible details, but for about 2 or 3 days, I was incredibly sick. And so I have this memory of me sitting in my room on my bed, and I was just angry. I was like, this is the last assignment I wanted to come to, and here I am. I thought I was ready to have these experiences, and now I'm stuck in my room. I can't be 10 feet away from the bathroom. This is horrible. And then I started to miss my possessions and my things. It's like the worst when you're sick and then you're not at home. And so I started to miss all of my comforts and my luxuries. And I think my journal says it best, actually. This is the journal I kept when I was in Kenya. And I'm not a big writer or journaler, but I thought it was really important just to try and capture my thoughts, my feelings, and experiences during these 2 months. So here we go. I literally wrote a list of things I was missing, and embarrassing as it is, I thought, in the spirit of full disclosure, here we go. I miss my bed. I miss my fuzzy blankets, dark chocolate, hot Cheetos, purple pens. So I hate journaling so much, I wrote them in a bunch of different colors. And my purple pen, my favorite one, died on the first day, of course. My iPod, hot showers, watching movies, green grass, my makeup, curling iron, ice cream, my cat, and the list goes on. I feel so awful for missing all of these luxuries at home, while people in the slums just 10 minutes away from me live day after day just trying to survive. Am I a bad person for missing and wanting these comforts? Why can't I just easily sacrifice all of this extra stuff for 2 months? And I struggled with this quite a bit. I became really emotional, and I really missed those things and those items, yet I had begun to meet people who were struggling just to put food on their table for their families, and I didn't quite know how to exactly process this. So I was sitting there alone in my room, just missing my things, missing my stuff, feeling guilty. And I remember sitting there, and I looked at my little table next to my bed, and I saw my Bible. And I literally think I said this out loud. Maybe I had a high fever, but I said, God, I think it's just you and me. And that was that. So I woke up on the 4th day of being incredibly ill, and it happened to be Sunday morning. And guess who was scheduled to talk at the local church that morning? That's right, I was. So I tried really hard to get out of it because public speaking terrifies me. I'd been really sick for 3 or 4 days. And so I went to my partner, Katie, and I was like, I've been really sick. I don't think I can talk. And she's like, well, you seem fine now. You've got it. You're fine. And I was like, well, okay, fine. So I went to the pastor, and I was like, Pastor, I'm really sick. I'm not ready. I've been sick for 3 days. I don't think I can talk. And he was like, oh, you can bring the word. You've got it. He was like, you're fine. Great. I'm glad everyone else had faith in me because I was not feeling so hot. So I managed to keep a tiny bit of breakfast down, the first food I kept down in like 4 days. And I was just reading my Bible, trying to get some motivation in me for that morning. And I found this verse, and I still love it to this day. It's in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and it goes, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in hardships, in persecutions, and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Okay, I was nowhere near delighting in this weakness and this hardship. I was pretty angry about it still, but I recited this verse just the very last line, "For when I am weak, then I am strong," all the way to the church that morning. So it's about a 30 to 40-minute walk to the church from where we were staying. This church was right in the heart of the slums. And so really quickly here, I just want to take a second to describe what an environment like the Corgocho slum is if you've never been. So I describe a slum environment as an assault on your senses. Every sense in your being, you can put that up. Yeah, perfect. So every sense is on full overdrive. Everything you're seeing is different. The visual of extreme poverty up close is really quite overwhelming. As you can see in this picture, it's a little washed out on the screen, but there are ditches that run alongside of the road, and a lot of times those are just overflowing with open sewage and garbage, and then those shacks are people's homes or maybe some small shops that they own. The sense of smell, as you can imagine, is horrific. All of those things I just mentioned are combined with the smells of cooking food. So that little pot up there is someone's cooking stove. So they're cooking within 3 feet of this massive garbage and sewage dump, and it's truly horrific. What you're hearing is it's a different language. A lot of people in Kenya speak 2 to 3 languages. The most common one is Swahili. Now, sometimes most Kenyans speak a tribal language, and then sometimes they speak English. But in really poor areas like the Corgocho slum, they don't know English. English is mostly taught in middle to upper class neighborhoods and schools. So most likely, when you're walking through an area like this, you're going to be hearing Swahili or a tribal language or something that you don't recognize. And then this is kind of funny, you have to find humor in it somehow, or you'd just be an emotional mess the whole time. So there was always really loud music playing in the slums. It would start at 6 in the morning and then go until dark. There was always this bass beat, and I don't know where it was coming from the whole time. I'm there's just music always playing here. It's kind of funny. So you're hearing different things. The sense of touch is so funny. So you'll see a lot of little kids running around in the slums, and it's not very common to see someone like me, someone as light-skinned in an area like Corgocho. And so the kids are funny. They think they're sneaking up on you, so they'll kind of sneak up to you, and then they'll pinch your arm. So you're walking, and you're feeling little kids pinch you. They're just so curious. They don't want to hurt you, but they're so curious about the color of your skin. They're like, what is this? Sometimes they'll hold your hand then as you're walking along, and then they'll get bored and laugh and run away. So the kids were just a huge sense, a huge piece of joy in this truly horrific environment. Another funny thing that would happen to us as we were walking in the slums, it seemed like every time we saw a baby, or more so when a baby saw us, they would start crying. And so I finally was I don't know what this is. So I asked my Kenyan friend who would take us around to our assignments, and I was like, Tony, what's the deal here? Why are all these kids crying? And he burst out laughing. He thought it was the funniest thing. And so his explanation was, he said they're not used to seeing white faces. And so when they see you, they think something is horribly wrong with you. You're scaring them. And so it was this joke as we were walking through the slums and little kids or babies would start screaming and crying. It was like, the white people are scaring the babies. Like, our friend thought it was so funny. I know, right? So anyway, okay, we've arrived at the church. Sunday morning, we've arrived at the church. And the church is a basic tin structure, and it has dirt floors, and they have a podium, and they have some instruments for the band. And so church in Kenya is an all-morning ordeal. It's no, like, you're going to be here for an hour, and then you can go on your way. It's like you're going to be here for 3 to 4 hours. And then you're going to want to stay after an hour or two to greet everyone. Especially if you're a guest, they want to get to know you. They want to ask you questions about who you are, where you're from, why you're there, what work are you doing. So it's it's a long process, it's a long Sunday, and it's very relational. And so that morning we worshiped and sang for about an hour and a half, and then the pastor called me up, and it was my turn to give the message. Now, when they tell you to prepare your messages for Kenya, they say you're going to need to talk for an hour. I thought, what? What am I going to say for an hour? But then they tell you, because it needs to be translated, if you have half an hour worth of material, your translator will be talking for half an hour, and there's your hour. If sometimes if you go to the central or northern regions, they triple translate your message, I've heard. So you'll speak in English, and then they'll translate it to Swahili, and then they'll translate it to Maasai. So that's a really long Sunday morning there. So I got up, and I'm like, yes, I have 20 minutes. I'm going to talk about the book of Jonah. Okay, the translator will talk, so that's 40 minutes. So, I'm a guest. What are they going to do to me? I'm not going to be back next Sunday. So I got up, and the pastor introduced me, and he talked to the crowd in Swahili, and there was kind of this back and forth conversation, and then the pastor turns to me, and he goes, "They don't need a translator. They can understand you. Welcome." And he walks off the stage. And in that moment, I was terrified. I was standing alone in front of a group of 100 Kenyans who were expecting me to bring the word for an hour, and I had 20 minutes on the book of Jonah, and I haven't eaten in 4 days, so this should be fun. Oh, there's a picture of me. So I only did what I knew what to do. I got up, and I just started talking. And I really can't explain what happened those 20 minutes, but I felt incredible. I felt alive and energetic and so excited that I got to share this story that had been really important to me. I got to share this story with all of these people, and you can see the picture's really blurry, but I'm like, this is great, I don't really know what happened, but I just felt so alive. And so I sat down after the message, and then church ended shortly after, 40 minutes early, thanks to me. And as church ended, it's just like that, I felt incredibly sick again, and I had to go back to bed for a few days. And the whole time I thought, man, someone must have really needed to hear about Jonah. I did so awesome, Someone must have really needed to hear what I had to say. Yeah, right. So I went back to bed. Again, I finished out my time in the Korgocho slum. I wasn't sick the whole time. I got better, and I had some amazing experiences and met a lot of really cool people. And then we got back together with our team of 30, and we had a few more weeks. We got to travel around Kenya, and we had all sorts of great experiences. And then on one of our last evenings in Kenya, I found myself sitting, and I was reading through my Bible and just having some quiet time. And I got to think about all of these cool experiences that I had. And my mind wandered to the story I just told you, the story about the time where I got to talk about Jonah to a church full of Kenyans in the heart of the slum. And again, I thought, man, someone must have really needed to hear about Jonah. And then it hit me. It hit me like a ton of bricks, like a revelation only can. No one needed to hear about Jonah. No one needed to hear what I had to say. It was me that needed to experience the love and the power of God when I felt like I had nothing and I felt really there was no physical way that I could make it through this experience. And I sat with that for a while, and I got really emotional. And then I remembered, oh yeah, they probably couldn't speak English anyway, so why did I think they could understand me in the first place? As I sat there thinking, I realized these whole 2 months, this whole process, all of my time in Kenya, this whole experience was a way for God to really get me outside of my culture, to get me outside of my comforts, my possessions, the things that I found reliance and strength in. God had to get me away from all of that and put me in a place where I had to fully depend on Him. So the biggest struggle then was coming back home and just trying to figure out, how do I live this realization out in our culture where we have so many material things? And so I really struggled with this. I had met a lot of great people in Kenya who had so few personal possessions, but their faith was huge. I mean, the worship experiences in Kenya are just uncomparable to anything I've found here. Not that they're not amazing here, but there's just something about getting outside of your possessions and your things and just worshiping with people that are just fully reliant on God. I think my journal from this time says it best. I kept up journaling for like 2 days after I got back, and then I'm not a journaler. I wish I was, but I just can't do it. So this is in black pen, so this is serious. So I write, and this is kind of embarrassing, but whatever. I officially miss Kenya. I've been home for almost 24 hours, and I'm ready to go back. Man, notice the shift just 2 months later. I'm shocked at how much stuff I have. Who needs so much crap? I lived out of a suitcase for 2 months and was perfectly content. Well, I mean, not the whole time, but I learned to be content with these fewer options or fewer choices. This morning, I couldn't decide what to wear because there are too many choices. The same at breakfast. Do we really need all these choices? For 2 months, my every move was planned and scheduled. Now, what am I supposed to do? Okay, I went to Kmart to buy cat litter today, and I had no idea there were so many different kinds. This is stuff cats poop in, right? How can there be so many different kinds? Okay, I went home to Glendive, Montana, so Kmart was all we had. Okay, being Kmart, my senses were completely overloaded. There is so much stuff. When I see our overabundance and materialism, I'm not mad, I'm confused. Why so much? I'm happier when life is simpler. God and relationships are truly important in my life. I'm saddened by our ability to distract ourselves from relationships and God and with technology and other crap. This is the next day. I'm extremely frustrated, and it's only 10 a.m. I went to the dentist this morning, and I got emotional because there was a TV, another screen above the exam chair. I was way too excited about the free toothbrush at the end of the visit. I still get excited about that. It's like one less thing I have to buy, though. Today, I had the urge to clean out all the extra stuff from my room. I have so many things I don't use, and I will never use. I can't think straight with all this clutter. Oh, this is funny. One positive thing about re-entry is I'm now a morning person. That lasted like 3 days. So I found it really challenging to sustain this belief in a full reliance on God with so many things. I hadn't realized before I went to Kenya how much things and clutter and possessions and belongings and whatever synonym you can say for stuff, how much this got in my way of a full reliance on God. And so my processing began to take form in these 2 questions. And these 2 questions I really landed on were, what happens when we become too reliant on our possessions and material things and we forget to rely on God? Or what happens when God is maybe our second, third, fourth, fifth choice down the line? the second question, what does it look like when we put anything other than God as number one in our lives? And so as I was processing, I found this quote, too, by Jimmy Carter, and I just thought it was really good. He says, this is from his Crisis of Confidence speech in 1979, and he says, human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but by what one owns. And I was really shocked to find that I thought this seemed to be true as I was experiencing coming back to the United States. So let's see what God has to say about all of this and my emotional ramblings at the time. So I found myself in Matthew. Let's go to Matthew 19. And here we see Jesus talking to the rich young ruler. So I'm going to go through it, and then I'll break it down real quick. Just then a man came to Jesus, and he asked him, "Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life?" "Why do you ask me about what is good?" Jesus replied. "There's only one who is good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments." "Which ones?" he asked. Jesus replied, "Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, you shall not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself." He's like, "Great, I've kept all those. What else do you got?" Jesus answered, "If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor. You will have treasure in heaven, then come follow me." When the young man heard this, he went away sad because he had lots of great stuff. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, it's hard for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." When the disciples heard this, they were astonished, and they asked, "Then who can be saved?" Jesus looked at them and said, "With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible." So let's break this down a little bit. So we see Jesus talking to this rich young guy, and it seems like he's doing pretty good. He's kept a lot of his commands. He hasn't killed anyone. He hasn't committed adultery. Great. That's awesome. And he's like, "What else do you got, Jesus?" And he says, "If you want to be perfect, sell your possessions and follow me." Well, I was reading a book written by someone far smarter than me about this passage, and they equated the word perfect to the word complete. So Jesus is essentially saying, if you want to be complete and if you want to be whole, you, this young man, you need to sell your stuff and follow me. I think to be fully signed up to God's service, you must be fully signed off to everything else. So we see he went away, he was sad because he had great wealth. And then Jesus turns to his disciples, and they're astonished that Jesus would say it's hard for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, back in Jesus' time, it was assumed that if you had great material wealth or you had a lot of things, it was assumed that you were favored by God or you were God's favorite. And so what I think we see Jesus doing here is he's leveling the playing field, and he's kind of saying, like, it doesn't matter what stuff you have or what things you own. It's about the person you are. So I think Jesus is just kind of leveling the playing field, and this is why they would be so surprised. So we see then, again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. What the heck does that mean? For me, it always brings up this image of like a giant camel and then a tiny needle. And I was like, I can't get up there and say that. I better figure out what this means. So Narrate suggests that it's possible there was a gate in Jerusalem at that time that was named the Needle's Eye. And so if you were traveling to Jerusalem with your camel, you would have to take all of your bags and possessions and things off of your camel to get it through this gate. And so that's maybe one thing Jesus might be referring to in this instance. The second thing Jesus might be referring to is the word camel was very similar to a word for thick sailor's rope. And so if you imagine trying to thread a sewer's needle with thick camel's rope, that's basically impossible, right? So maybe those are a few things Jesus is referring to. But I think this phrase that I found in the book really just sums it up nicely. He's talking about the moment when all our human calculations and possibilities stop and God's new possibilities start. He's really saying what's impossible for us is totally possible for him. And that's pretty cool. Now, I'm not telling you to sell all your stuff. Please don't go sell all your stuff or give it away or like nudge your spouse and say, see, she's telling you to sell that stuff. I'm totally not. And Jesus, I don't think he's telling us all to either. As we see in the Bible, he gives this command to one person, and he's giving this command to the ruler because he's come to love his possessions, and he's come to love his things more than God himself. So I don't think it's even about the amount of stuff or things or possessions you have. I think it's about the emotions and the attachments that we attribute to these inanimate objects. When God wants to be number one in our life, he doesn't want our things or our stuff to come before him. At the end of the day, I think it's all about loving God and loving people. And if we go to Matthew 22, we're in Matthew a lot today. That's okay, though. Okay, so Matthew 22, we see Jesus talking to some of the religious leaders of his time, and they're testing him, and they're asking him, which is the greatest commandment? And Jesus replies, I just love his reply. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. This is the first and greatest command. The second is like it, love your neighbor and yourself as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. I just love that. It's really what Jesus is saying. It's about God and it's about people. Your stuff and your things and your possessions are great, but as long as we're mindful of that order, God first, your neighbor second, I think it's safe to say your stuff and your things and everything else can come after that. For me, it took a trip halfway around the world, finding myself in truly one of the most horrific and challenging environments that I've ever experienced, doing things that I didn't think were possible for me to find this full reliance and dependence on God. And guys, I pray that we can continue as a church family and as a community. I pray that we can continue to find purpose and find meaning in a God who really loves us and the people around us. And this is kind of the idea behind the Pop-Up Helena that we introduced last month. We gave you this tool for you all to better meet each other. And if you're not familiar with that, swing by the Gather Scatter table. I'd love to explain that to you. But we really think that it's about God and people, and we hope that that tool has been useful or might be useful for you in helping to meet other people. So to sum up this morning, I found this quote by Joshua Fields Milburn, and he's a minimalist. Now, I'm far from a minimalist, but I think his quote really sums up what I'm trying to say nicely, and he says, love people, use things, the opposite doesn't work. So I'd love to pray to close us out. God, man, thank you for who you are. Thank you that you love us so much and that you care for us so deeply. Thanks that we can come together this morning and dig into your word and learn more things about you. God, we pray for Kenya and the church in Kenya. Just be with them and bless their ministry as well. Yeah, thanks for this morning. We love you. Amen.
If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.